The rain-slicked streets of downtown shimmered under sodium streetlights, a cold October drizzle soaking through the city's pulse. Elias Thornton, a 42-year-old CEO of a tech empire called Nexlify, strode through the crowd, his tailored navy suit now clinging to his frame, a jagged tear in the sleeve from a careless snag on his car door. His jaw clenched, eyes darting to his watch, 7:32 p.m. He was late for a board meeting that could secure a billion-dollar merger. The tear in his jacket wasn't just fabric. It was a crack in his meticulously curated image, a symbol of control slipping. His polished loafers splashed through puddles, each step a drumbeat of urgency. A faint glow spilled from a street vendor's stall ahead, tucked between a shuttered deli and a neon-lit pawn shop. The vendor, Amara Khalil, a 58-year-old woman with silver-streaked hair pulled into a loose bun, leaned over her sewing machine, her fingers steady as they guided thread through faded denim. Her stall, draped in crimson fabric, smelled of cardamom tea and old leather, a tiny oasis in the urban storm. Elias slowed, his gaze catching on her hands, calloused, deliberate, weaving order from chaos. He stopped, rain dripping from his brow, and said he needed his jacket. Fixed now, no delays. Amara's eyes, warm as amber, met his. She told him to take a breath, that a torn sleeve wasn't the end of the world. Her voice, soft but steady, cut through the city's din, and for a moment, Elias froze, unaccustomed to such calm defiance. Amara gestured for Elias to sit on a weathered stool under her canopy, her hands already reaching for a spool of navy thread that matched his jacket. The air around her stall carried the tang of wet pavement and the faint sweetness of her tea, steaming in a chipped mug nearby. Elias, impatient, said he didn't have time for this, that he'd pay double if she hurried. Amara's lips curved into a faint smile, and she told him, money didn't stitch souls back together. Her words, laced with a quiet wisdom, made Elias's shoulders tense, his usual armor of authority useless against her unhurried grace. She worked the needle through the torn sleeve, her stitches small and precise as if mending more than fabric. Elias watched, his fingers tapping his knee, the rhythm of his anxiety clashing with the steady hum of her sewing machine. Amara said she'd seen men like him before, rushing toward something they'd never catch. Elias scoffed, but her words lingered, a pebble in his polished shoe. Outside, the city roared on, horns blaring, footsteps splashing, but inside her stall, time seemed to slow, the crimson drapes softening the chaos. Elias's phone buzzed in his pocket, a reminder of the merger, but he didn't reach for it. Something about Amara's presence, her unshakable calm, held him there, a tether in the storm. Amara finished the sleeve, her stitches invisible, the jacket restored, as if never torn. She handed it back to Elias, her eyes crinkling as she told him to slow down, that life wasn't a race to win. Elias stood, slipping the jacket on, the fabric smooth against his skin, but her words clung heavier than the rain. He muttered a thanks, dropping a crisp $100 bill on her table, more out of habit than gratitude. Amara pushed it back, saying she didn't fix things for profit, she fixed them to remind people they could be whole again. Elias stepped back into the rain, the city's pulse swallowing him once more. But as he walked, Amara's voice echoed in his mind, her gentle rebuke a splinter under his skin. He glanced back, her stall a fading glow in the distance, the crimson drapes fluttering like a heartbeat. For the first time in years, Elias felt a flicker of doubt, not about the merger, but about the man he'd become. The boardroom loomed ahead, a glass tower piercing the skyline, but something in him resisted its pull. Amara's words, her steady hands, had stitched something deeper, something he couldn't yet name. In the boardroom, Elias stood at the head of a polished mahogany table, the city skyline sprawling beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. The air smelled of leather and ambition, the hum of projectors underscoring tense voices. His team pitched the merger, numbers flashing on screens, but Elias's mind drifted to Amara's stall, to the scent of cardamom and the rhythm of her needle. Her words about souls, about rushing gnawed at him, a quiet rebellion against the life he'd built. He presented his vision, his voice sharp, commanding, but it faltered when he caught his reflection in the glass. The mended sleeve, flawless, seemed to mock his polished facade. A junior analyst, Priya Sharma, a 29-year-old with sharp eyes and a habit of tugging her scarf, noticed his distraction. She asked if he was all right, her tone cautious but kind. Elias brushed it off, saying he was fine, just focused on the deal. But Priya's gaze lingered, seeing something he didn't want seen. The meeting stretched on, the stakes climbing, but Elias felt a strange detachment, as if the room were underwater. Amara's crimson drapes flashed in his mind, a motif of warmth against the boardroom's sterile chill. After the meeting, Elias lingered in his corner office, the city a mosaic of lights below. The jacket hung on a coat rack, its mended sleeve catching the moonlight. He poured a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid swirling, but it tasted hollow. Amara's words echoed, again about catching something he'd never reach. He'd built Nexlify, from nothing, a monument to his control, but tonight it felt like a cage. Priya knocked, entering with a tablet, saying she'd noticed his hesitation in the meeting, that the team needed his focus. Elias snapped, saying he didn't need her concern, but his voice lacked its usual edge. Priya stood her ground, her scarf slipping as she told him success wasn't worth losing himself. Her words, like Amara's, carried a quiet truth that unsettled him. He dismissed her, but as she left, Elias's gaze fell on the jacket. The crimson motif of Amara's stall pulsed in his memory, a reminder of something softer, something real. He wondered who he was without the title, the suit, the empire. The next morning, Elias walked the same street, the rain replaced by a crisp dawn. The city smelled of wet asphalt and coffee, the air sharp against his skin. Amara's stall was there, crimson drapes catching the sunrise, her sewing machine already humming. He didn't know why he'd come. Curiosity, maybe, or something deeper. Amara looked up, her smile unchanged, and said she knew he'd be back, that men like him always carried a tear somewhere. Elias stood, hands in his pockets, and asked how she could be so calm in a city that never stopped. Amara laughed softly, her needle pausing, and said the city moved fast, but hearts didn't have to. She offered him tea, her chipped mug steaming, and he accepted, the warmth seeping into his hands. For the first time in years, Elias felt no rush, no ticking clock. As he sipped, Amara stitched a child's torn backpack, her hands as steady as ever. Elias watched, the crimson drapes framing her like a quiet rebellion against the city's chaos. He felt a pull, a need to understand her, to understand himself. Days passed, and Elias found himself returning to Amara's stall, drawn by a pull he couldn't name. The city's rhythm felt louder now, its demands sharper against the quiet of her crimson-draped world. He'd sit, sipping tea, watching her mend torn coats, bags, lives. One evening, as the sky burned orange, Amara told him about her past-day refugee who'd fled war, her hands learning to sew to survive, each stitch a defiance of loss. Elias listened, his usual defenses crumbling, her story a mirror to his own buried wounds. He admitted he hadn't always been this way, ruthless, driven. As a boy, he'd loved sketching, dreaming of art, but his father's death forced him to grow up fast, to build instead of dream. Amara nodded, her needle pausing, and said dreams didn't die, they waited. Her words landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading through him. The crimson drapes swayed, their color now a symbol of resilience, of hearts that endured. Elias felt exposed, but not alone. Amara's stall, was no longer just a stop, it was a reckoning. At Nexlify, the merger talks intensified, the boardroom a battlefield of egos and numbers. Elias led with precision, but Priya noticed his quieter moments, the way his eyes drifted to the mended sleeve. During a break, she asked him what had changed. Her scarf knotted tightly as if bracing for his usual sharpness. Elias hesitated, then said he'd met someone who saw through him, someone who reminded him life wasn't just deals. Priya's eyes softened, and she said she envied that kind of clarity, that she'd been chasing numbers too long herself. Elias returned to Amara's stall that night, the city's neon glow harsher, now its noise grating. Amara was mending a child's scarf, her hands steady as ever. She looked up and said he carried a different weight, now one he could choose to set down. Elias didn't respond, but her words sank deep, stirring memories of the boy who'd sketched under oak trees, free of ambition's chains. The crimson drapes glowed under her lantern, their hue now a beacon of possibility, a reminder that he could choose differently. Elias began sketching again, late at night in his office, charcoal smudging his fingers. Simple lines at first, trees, faces, Amara's stall. The act felt foreign, like rediscovering a lost limb. He brought a sketch to Amara, a rough outline of her crimson drapes, and showed it to her, saying it was nothing, just a whim. Amara studied it, her eyes bright, and said it wasn't nothing, it was him coming back to himself. Her words unlocked something in Elias, a flood of memories, his father's laugh, the smell of oak leaves, the freedom of creation. He sat longer at her stall, the city's hum fading, replaced by the clink of her needle and the warmth of her tea. Amara shared more of her story, how sewing had saved her, how each stitch was a choice to keep going. Elias listened, the crimson drapes now a symbol of rebirth, their hue deepening with every visit. He left that night, sketchbook under his arm, feeling lighter, as if Amara had mended more than his jacket. The merger neared its climax, a make-or-break moment for Nexlify. Elias stood in the boardroom, his voice steady but his heart elsewhere. The mended sleeve, once a flaw, now felt like a badge, a reminder of Amara's words. Priya watched him, her scarf loose, her eyes catching his subtle shift. During a heated debate, Elias paused, then said the merger's cost, human, not financial, was too high. The room fell silent, his team stunned. Priya nodded faintly, her respect clear. He left the meeting early, drawn back to Amara's stall. The city was quieter now, the air crisp with autumn's bite. Amara was mending a wedding dress, its lace delicate under her hands. She looked up and said, he seemed lighter, like a man who'd found his way. Elias admitted he'd questioned the merger, that her words had changed him. Amara smiled, saying change was just a stitch in time, nothing more. The crimson drapes glowed, their hue now a symbol of courage, of choosing heart over empire. Elias began visiting Amara daily, each trip a pilgrimage to clarity. The stall's crimson drapes, once just fabric, now marked a threshold between his old life and something new. He sketched more, filling pages with cityscapes, Amara's hands, the faces of strangers. One evening, he showed her a drawing of her stall, the crimson drapes vivid against the city's gray. Amara laughed, saying he'd captured her heart, not just her home. Priya joined him once, curious about the stall that had changed him. She sat, sipping tea, and told Amara she admired her calm, that it reminded her of her late mother. Amara nodded, saying calm was just love, stitched into every moment. Elias watched, feeling a bridge form between them, their stories weaving together under the crimson glow. The city's noise felt distant now, its demands muted. Elias was no longer running, and the crimson drapes stood as a testament to that shift, a motif of belonging. The merger collapsed, Elias's decision to prioritize people over profit shaking Nexlify's foundations. The boardroom buzzed with dissent. But Priya stood by him, saying he'd made the right call, that integrity mattered more than money. Elias felt a weight lift the city's pulse no longer his master. He walked to Amara's stall, the crimson drapes a beacon in the dusk. Amara was closing up, her hands folding fabric with care. She looked at him and said he'd found his heart, that the rest would follow. Elias nodded, saying he was done chasing shadows. He handed her a sketch, a portrait of her, needle in hand, crimson drapes behind. Amara's eyes glistened, and she said it was perfect, that it captured her soul. The crimson drapes swayed, their hue now a symbol of home, of truths embraced. Elias stood taller, no longer the CEO, but a man rediscovering his roots. Months later, Elias stepped away from Nexlify, passing leadership to Priya, whose vision balanced profit with purpose. He rented a small studio, its walls soon covered with sketches, city streets. Amara's stall, faces of strangers. The smell of charcoal and coffee filled the air, a new rhythm to his days. He visited Amara often, their talks now a ritual, her crimson drapes a constant in his shifting world. One evening, Amara shared her dream to open a community workshop, teaching others to sew, to mend, to heal. Elias listened, then said he'd help, that he had resources and a heart ready to give. Amara's smile was brighter than the city's lights, and she said he'd already given her something, his truth. The crimson drapes glowed, their hue now a symbol of legacy, of lives intertwined. Elias felt whole, his sketches a bridge to the boy he'd been, guided by Amara's gentle words. The workshop took shape in a repurposed warehouse, its walls painted crimson in homage to Amara's stall. Elias helped fund it, his sketches decorating the space, each one a story of redemption. Amara taught classes, her hands guiding nervous fingers through thread and fabric. Priya volunteered, her scarf now a bright crimson, a nod to the stall that had changed them all. One night, Elias stood outside the warehouse, watching Amara teach a group of teenagers, their laughter filling the air. He sketched the scene, the crimson walls glowing under soft lights. Amara caught his eye and said he'd built something better than an empire, a home. Elias smiled, his heart full, the weight of his old life gone. The crimson motif, once a fleeting glimpse, now stood as a monument to connection, to lives mended stitch by stitch. Elias was no longer running, and the city felt alive, not oppressive. Years later, the workshop thrived, a beacon in the city's heart. Amara, now frilier, still taught, her hands slower but her spirit unchanged. Elias, his hair streaked with gray, painted now, his canvases alive with crimson hues, drapes, walls, hearts. Priya led Nexlify with purpose, her office adorned with Elias's art, a reminder of their shared journey. One quiet evening, Elias and Amara sat at her stall, the crimson drapes faded but still vibrant. She said she was proud of him, that he'd mended more than a jacket, he'd mended himself. Elias took her hand, saying she'd shown him how, that her gentle words had been his guide. The city hummed softly, its lights twinkling like stars. The crimson drapes swayed, their hue a final note of love, of lives transformed. Elias stood, canvas under his arm, ready to paint the next chapter, forever changed by a street vendor's gentle hands.